Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Ask a Maker Educator. I'm Danny. I'm the community coordinator here at Maker Ed, and I'm super excited to be here for another episode where we highlight some of the amazing educators and the amazing work that's going on as part of the Maker Promise. The Maker Promise is a really exciting collaboration between us here at Maker Ed and Digital Promise. It is a partnership, and we issued going on. We issued a call to action. I'm hearing myself in the background. We issued a call to action and had educators in school districts and community partners around the country sign on and say that they are going to do three key things. They're going to dedicate a space for making. They're going to dedicate someone in that learning environment as a champion who's going to help support the making and make the making happen, and that they're going to showcase the making that students do in their learning environment. And so these are three things that right now we have educators in every single state that have signed on and said they're going to do these things in their learning environments. And we're super excited to have some of them here on Ask a Maker Educator. Digital Promise has been putting out these really amazing videos highlighting some of the work that's been going on as part of this collaboration. And last week we brought on some folks from Sitka, Alaska. This week I am very excited to introduce Galen Jenkins from Greenville, South Carolina, from Riverside Middle School. She is the star, and I will say that, she is the star of the second Digital Promise Maker Learning Advocacy video, which I am excited to share with everyone right now. We'll go ahead and play that video, give you a sense of the kind of work that's going on over in Greenville, and then jump into an exciting conversation with Galen. So here we go. Let's take a look at this second Digital Promise Maker Learning video.
Brannon Middle School, I have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that are in the library club. We started out with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We thought about, okay, in our own local community, what are our needs?
People are struggling with poverty, hunger, and illiteracy, and we're trying to fix that.
Sponsors for books and a tutoring program. That's really interesting.
We narrowed it down to 2, education and no more hunger, and we just decided to do both. We separated into small groups to just brainstorm, come up with how we can help.
So many people had different ideas on how to do this, and so to be able to get everyone's ideas included into the project was a real challenge.
So what we're making is a little free library/food pantry, which we are going to call the Read and Feed.
There were kids who were interested in a lot of different aspects of the same project. I had a lot of students who wanted to build things and be hands-on. I had some that wanted to make flyers and videos, and I had some who just wanted to do more of the social organization behind a food drive or a book drive.
We made a blueprint and we printed it.
This is the 3D printed model of our Read and Feed. It has 2 sides. We have the book side, which is bookshelf, and you have the oven side, which just opens and you put food in there.
I learned a lot about teamwork in this and how to function as a group, and I think I've grown from that.
My peers and I helped each other by giving each other advice and also giving each other pep talks to actually do something. This project has been a good way for me to learn leadership skills and to be able to figure out that I can make a difference.
This project absolutely helped me understand the way I learn, because I am definitely a hands-on learner. So that kind of hands-on learning, but with other people, will definitely help me in some of my other classes with projects.
Libraries are in the middle of a big shift. We used to be the keepers of knowledge. It's becoming a shift to equity of access to things like computers and 3D printers and circuit kits and anything that they can use to take what they know and what they can find online or in videos and use that to make something new. It empowers them to be creators instead of just consumers of knowledge. We get to help students become creators and innovators and take their knowledge and their skills and their passions and make something with them. Talk to your students and see what they're interested in, and then jump in.
All right. I've watched that, probably 10 times even just today, and I get excited every time. That's great. Just a quick reminder before we jump into our conversation, if you out there in YouTube audience world wants to be part of the conversation, please go ahead and send your questions and comments to #AskAMakerEducator on social media, or you can tweet at makered.org, or you can submit on our website. There are lots of ways to be involved. So if you're watching and you have a question, please share that out. So Galen, hello and welcome, and tell us a little about yourself and who you are and what you do and why we're here.
Okay. So just to tell you, I get emotional every time I watch that video too. So my name is Galen Jenkins. I am a middle school librarian. I just finished my 8th year, and I started in undergrad thinking I wanted to be a teacher. I did English and history, and then I got out of school and I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. So libraries really spoke to me, and I decided to go get my MLIS. And I was never actually in like the traditional classroom. I worked in the public libraries and then came into school librarianship that way.
Awesome. And so what inspired you? I mean, it sounds like you've always been excited about libraries as a really exciting learning space. What inspired you to start bringing design thinking and making into your school library?
Well, I was really fortunate to have a great peer in my school who taught art. He didn't call it art, though. He called it media, visual arts, and design, which was a significant change from like art as we knew it, like in school. He brought 3D printers into our school for the first time, and he's the one that kind of started my creative juices flowing again, in kind of a different vein than I had always thought librarianship was going to take me. So I started there, and then, like any good librarian, we start researching, and I found more and more and more things out there that were just broadening what I thought was possible in public education. So that's kind of where we started.
Definitely. And how did you kind of make the leap, or what? I'm making an assumption there. Was it a leap to really take all that making and design thinking and start shifting it towards community problems and getting your students to think about making change in the place that they live?
Right. So we were fortunate to get a grant through Digital Promise Global. So we're a learning studio site, and that just empowered me in a way that it would have taken me years to gather as much equipment and support to be able to kind of make that leap, because it was a leap.
Yeah.
Before we were a learning studio site, we did kind of maker events in our makerspace library, and I always wanted to connect it with our school community. So anybody could teach a maker event. We had a student teach duct tape wallets. Our PTA president taught jewelry making. Math teacher taught knitting. And the knitting one was actually our first maker event. And my clerk and I both have preemie babies. So when we discovered that somebody could teach knitting, we were like, hey, let's learn something and find a way to kind of connect to our community and give back. So the project was, we're gonna learn how to knit preemie hats and then give them to the hospital. And that's kind of what started everything. And that came along before the Learning Studios piece. The Learning Studios piece is what empowered me to like use power tools instead of knitting needles.
Yeah.
But it was a great way for us to connect not just within our building, but also to the greater community as a whole.
It sounds like it. And it sounds like a lot of this excitement really started with you, and it started with you doing making and you playing and you exploring. Would you say that's true?
Yeah. I mean, I never considered myself a maker. I was an athlete growing up, and my sisters were really creative, and I always was kind of like the clip art queen over there in the corner. So my family thinks it's hysterical that I'm like a maker person now, but But yeah, after college, I started kind of taking the time to pursue my own interests. I like to bake. I like to decorate cakes. I like to do cool bulletin boards. And that just kind of morphed into having the creative confidence to try new things and know that if I love it, I can go with it. And if I don't, and I'm really awful at it, then I can drop it and move on to something new. And I think that's part of what maker education can really do for kids, is expose them to all of these different things that they may not have a chance to be exposed to, and let them kind of figure out where they want to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. It sounds like you had such a quintessential maker learning development, and now you get the pleasure of imparting that on your students, it seems like. How do you think that having that experience yourself has made it easier or given you a new sort of light into how you present it to your students?
I think I am more willing to get in there and do things with them. So I think part of what's difficult for librarians or teachers is feeling like you have to know how to do whatever it is you're about to do with your students. And I'm really free to learn right along with them.
Mm-hmm.
So half the time they learn way faster than me, and I end up learning from them. And sometimes we're just in there trying to figure it out together. So we're watching YouTube videos on how to fix our 3D printer, or any of those little things that are learning experiences that happen all the time in everyone's life. But it's just kind of being open to trying new things, taking those risks, and then realizing that if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to dive actually into the actual project we saw in that video, because I feel like there's just so much fun stuff there, and so much that educators in so many different settings can really take away from that. One thing that really stood out to me, and right off the bat, what I noticed was that it's, like you're saying, it's students leading that project, and it's students who are stepping up and saying, this is the direction we want to go, and this is what we're excited about. How was that for you? Was it a challenge to get your students to step up and be both leaders like that, and also to then be leaders and encourage collaboration amongst each other?
So the kind of genesis of the whole idea came from a Learning Studios project that we were going to try to do, which was a global goals, local solutions project. Mm-hmm. And of course that really spoke to me because I love the local solutions part of it. And I really feel like sometimes our students don't connect to the larger global community. Like everything is right here in front of them. And even though we're more connected than ever, they still don't, they just still don't get it. Sure. So looking at the UN's global goals, I mean, some of them we had to kind of talk about, like, what is, gender equity and things like that, that they just, as, 11 to 14-year-olds, that just wasn't part of something they thought about day to day. So after we kind of talked about what everything was, I don't know if you noticed, we did a sticky note kind of vote. Yeah. It was an easy way for me to visually see what people wanted to do without trying to hear 40 people try to talk at me at the same time.
Yeah. So in that instance, did you just have a lot of these global challenges up available, and students just got excited and stuck up those stickies?
Yeah, we started with that kind of, it's a beautiful infographic kind of thing. Yeah. So I just put that up on our board and said, hey guys, let's look at this and see, okay, what kind of global challenges are we looking at, and how can we translate that into needs in our own community?
Sure.
So they dove in, and I had kids that wanted to make solar panels and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I was like, guys, this is amazing, but we've got to trim this down a little bit. So I feel like when you work with kids, they either sit there and stare at you because they have no ideas, or they go so big and so just out of this world that you're like, okay, how am I going to get this back to earth and be something we can actually do? So when we were looking at things like that, I said, okay, these are all amazing ideas, and I think we should probably look at all of them. What do you guys think is a reasonable goal for us to set?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they kind of narrowed in on those two pieces. They really wanted to work on hunger, and they really wanted to work on the education piece. And I was like, well, let's pick one. And they refused. They flat out refused to pick one. My kind of leader there, the girl with the cool hair, she was kind of my ringleader, and she was like, no, like they're both so important and we can't choose one. And so this is where I'm probably gonna get people in trouble, but I was like, go to town then. Like I'm not gonna hold you back from exploring this, and we can always refine later.
Sure.
And they came up with that little free library idea. And there are some little free libraries out in our communities. Like we know what they are. But they were really stuck on this food drive.
Sure.
I was like, well, what are we going to do with this food? And one of them piped up and said, well, people who are struggling with this literacy thing probably are struggling with it because they don't have time to read because they're worried about other stuff. And I was like, yeah, Maslow's hierarchy, right? So, I was like, you're absolutely right. People have all of these needs. And if they can't meet basic needs, like how do I feed my kids, learning how to read is probably lower on their priorities. I was like, you're right. So what are we going to do? And that's when a group of boys was like, well, why don't we just make it one thing?
Yeah.
Like, why can't it just be both? So they got on Tinkercad and started messing around with the design, and that's what we printed.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. Like, I still can't believe that 12-year-old kids did that.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing that they came up with that idea. And I just loved watching, even in that little 2-minute, 3-minute chunk, you see them taking so many different paths through the project, and really following their excitement about the overall project, but also the little excitements that pop up within that. I guess sort of 2-part question. How was it for you as an educator to watch them find those little moments of excitement and kind of follow them? And then how did you kind of encourage students to look for those opportunities?
So to answer the first question, it validates everything that I try to do. So as a librarian, I don't have that kind of hard and fast curriculum that I have to follow like a classroom teacher might. So I am always kind of hands in all things type situations, and seeing the kids kind of look at the situation as a whole. And then I provided some structure in terms of like listening to them talk about what they wanted to do. So they wanted to build stuff. And then one of them was like, well, we got to get people to donate things for this. So we need to do the food drive and the book drive. And I said, okay, so there's 2 more things we got to do. And then somebody was like, well, if nobody knows about it, how can they donate things? So then our social media group was formed, and somebody was like, well, what are we going to tell people? And literally the only guidance I gave to them was, maybe you guys should look for some statistics that kind of put in people's face, like, why is this an issue? And that's how our research team was born. So 5 groups, they organically put themselves in the groups. I just gave them the group names.
Yeah.
And they went from there. And it was great because we followed this design thinking path where they tried to really empathize. So our research people presented about their stuff that they found so that the rest of the group could kind of digest and work on maybe empathizing with people in that situation. Mm-hmm. And we also they all worked independently, but we had them kind of present to our group as a whole, like, hey, here's what we're working on. And it helped. I mean, as a microcosm for them, it happens in the business world all the time where, you're working on something and you're working on it and you're working on it and you're like, I got it. And then when someone else looks at it, they're like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. Like, how did you get this from that? And but no one else can understand. So helping kids kind of develop that communication piece and working as a team and presenting, communicating as a group was really helpful because they also learned that other people can enhance your ideas.
Yeah.
Like our social group, they were working on flyers and they were like, oh, we should get a hashtag. And somebody else from a different group was like, let's call it Read and Feed. And it was like, oh, that's the name of our thing. And that came from the group who was building. It wasn't even the group who was supposed to be coming up with that.
Sure.
So it was just great. It was an organic thing that really validated how I feel about design thinking and projects in schools as a whole.
I love that. That's really, really awesome to hear. We have time for a couple more questions. I don't want to shift away from the excitement, but I do wonder, and I'm sure a lot of other folks watching might be wondering. You mentioned that you don't often have to follow the same curriculum guidelines and sets of things that you have to get done. You have a little more freedom in your space. Do you have any thoughts or advice for an educator who maybe is a little more beholden to those standards that they need to be meeting?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I do with our teachers in my building is try to offer ways to incorporate making into their curriculum. So it's not always as grandiose as, hey, we're going to build this thing that goes out into the community. But the art teacher I mentioned before, they did a whole campaign with stroke awareness that was amazing. And they went to a local college and actually worked with college students on it. Mm-hmm. And we've done things like incorporating coding with Scratch into science content where the kids designed an animation showing the digestive system, which was great. You can imagine how that ended up with 7th graders doing the digestive system. But, it was great because it incorporates a lot of cross-curricular skills. It incorporates a lot of those 21st century technology skills. And it also brings in those soft skills that we kind of know that kids need, but that are really hard to incorporate into everyday, like, we got to teach to the test type thing. So we've had some success, but it's definitely a work in progress.
Yeah.
Flexibility is as flexible as you can be as a classroom teacher was key, and kind of being willing to take that risk and let the kids go with it.
Awesome. If you were to give one small first step or piece of advice or something from your experience so far to an educator outside of the library, what might that be?
Ooh.
I know it's a big one.
It's hard because I never lived that life. Sure. I understand it. My husband was a classroom teacher, but it's easy for me to be like, yeah, just do it. I think maybe starting with some of the situations like project-based learning might be a good kind of gateway into making. Maybe start with a project, but open it up to let kids kind of follow where they want to go. So prompts are really important. Having a good prompt can make or break your project. You'll do a lot of explaining and guiding if you don't come up with a good prompt. So I think finding a good hook. It's kind of like creating a story, right? Mm-hmm. You got to come up with a good hook to get your kids involved and engaged, and want to do it. And once you do that, things like the Read and Feed happen. So,
love it. I think that's great advice. We've got one more question for you, Galen. This has been a ton of fun, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. To close us out, you kind of mentioned it in the video, and I'd love if you could just reflect a little more on kind of what you're particularly excited about, or just kind of how you see libraries shifting and changing and becoming a space where students can really access exciting new kinds of knowledge, and why that's really exciting for you.
Yeah, so as a librarian, we are kind of in that shift. And I know it's happened before, like when computers first kind of entered the scene and everyone was like, books are dead. You know, we go through these stages of growth. And to me, this is just another stage of growth where we're expanding. I feel like libraries never shrink, like we just grow. So we're growing to incorporate new things that people need access to. We grew to include computers. Now we're kind of growing again to include some of those tools that people really need access to, but that aren't necessarily readily available everywhere. Mm-hmm. So my kids come in and they are obsessed with the 3D printer, and we print stuff all the time. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought I'm going to have a 3D printer in my library. But those are the kind of things that I think really start engaging students, kind of open up a new, kind of a new frontier. I mean, they are engaging in digital making, 3D design, that are really kind of gateways to future careers for them. And I think what it comes down to is, especially in a school library, we're trying to get our kids ready to join our local and global communities. So I wanted them to be as prepared as they possibly can be for what's coming. And to do that, we have to kind of push what's not readily available to them into their hands so that they can start becoming the people who are going to shape our future.
I love it. I feel like that's a perfect way to close out any good live video. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Galen. Do you have any resources or things that you want to make sure we get shared out to the world, or things that you would be excited for people to see, whether it's documentation of your projects or really anything?
Yeah. So we just did another awesome project, and we've kind of been documenting it on our Instagram feed. But my kids just made an awesome game called The Struggles Are Real. It's an empathy-based game about, what it's like to be a teenager. And I think the realm of play is kind of my next new frontier about, creating ways to engage students that way and let them not only show their knowledge, but teach other people at the same time. So definitely reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about this stuff. And if you're interested in more of the design thinking, the Stanford D School is great. Mary Cantwell's deep design thinking model really worked well for me because it flips some things around a little bit. So I definitely suggest maybe checking her out too. Twitter is a great resource.
It is indeed. And so we will definitely share all those links. They will be archived along with a recorded version of this video on the Maker Ed website in the Ask Maker Educator section. So you can check this video out, as well as all of the other amazing videos in the series. Thank you, Galen. This has been great. We will be back again in 2 weeks with the third edition of our Maker Promise Maker Learning Video Superstar sessions with some great educators from Boston. So join us next week. We really are excited. Thank you, Galen, and have a good night, everybody.